The Chargers have a massive problem on their hands after the loss of Joe Alt, an all-pro caliber left tackle who could now put the entire Chargers offense in jeopardy in 2025. What's up, everyone? I'm Sam Peña, a Bolt fan in the Berg for Chargers Digest, where we talk about all things Lightning. It's been a tough week so far for all Chargers fans, or really you could say just a tough existence for all Chargers fans, since we rarely seem to find any sort of happiness. And yet we started to see that at the beginning of the season with that 3-0 start, and now it seems to have all fallen apart after that disastrous loss to the New York Giants. But I'll say this, I think people are starting to go a little bit overboard now, thinking that the season is over and there's no chance at even making the playoffs. All of that I think is a little bit overblown. This is still a good football team. It's still a good football team. They still have a top 5 quarterback. They still have one of the 10 best head coaches in the game. And they still have a pretty good defense as well. But of course, everybody's still mourning the loss of Joe Alt after that injury last week. So I think it's time for us to be able to talk about what losing Joe Alt means for this offense, what it'll look like without him, and what the Chargers can do to improve their offensive line play. So without further ado, let's talk about it. First of all, we have to talk about the injury itself. It happened very early on in the game against the Giants. Zion Johnson just kind of rode his guy into the back of Alt's leg. It collapsed underneath him, and then he went to the locker room and was never seen again for the Chargers. Now, the reports are that Alt wanted to go back into the game despite the injury, but the doctors told him that's not happening. You need to have a boot on it, and you need to just rest. I think that was the right decision by them, especially when we found out this is a high ankle sprain. This is something that can be a very annoying injury if you don't treat it properly. It's one of those injuries that if you continue to play, you have a high risk of re-injuring it once again. So keeping him out of there was the right call by the Chargers, despite his willingness to keep playing through the pain. We don't know exactly what grade of a sprain it was, but we do know that it seems for now as if he has a high possibility of avoiding IR. Jim Harbaugh was just asked by Daniel Popper about his availability. Harbaugh said that it's doubtful he's going to play this Sunday against the Washington Commanders, but he didn't say that the Chargers will be putting him on IR, which means it's possible that Alt could be back in a couple of weeks. Now, the worst case scenario out of this is that Alt could be out for a maximum of 6 weeks out of this, which would obviously not be ideal. But I will say that if there is a time to lose an all-pro caliber tackle, it is now at this point in the schedule for the Chargers, as they're not facing a premier pass rush for the next few weeks. But the loss of Alt is definitely going to sting, so let's talk about what this Chargers offensive line is going to look like without him. Let's just say I don't have a lot of confidence. I mean, through the first few weeks of the season, the Chargers offensive line was doing pretty well against the Chiefs and against the Raiders, but neither of those teams really have top-tier NFL defenses. And, well, the Chiefs have a top-tier NFL defense, but not a top-tier pass rush. And when you look at this Chargers defense, this Chargers offensive line, it was a little bit of fool's gold, and I had an idea that it was going to be a little bit of fool's gold going into the year, and I think the past 2 weeks have kind of shown exactly my fears. We're going from Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt, 2 of the 10 best offensive tackles in football, to Trey Pipkins and Austin Deculus. Deculus was someone who the Chargers traded a late-round pick for at the end of preseason. He came in and was one of the worst tackles in all of football against the New York Giants. Gave up 6 pressures against them. He was consistently missing his assignments. He didn't have the footwork to be able to get out there and stop either Brian Burns or Abdul Carter. It was just a disaster. If you look at the rest of the offensive line, it wasn't much better. Bradley Bozeman has been an extreme liability for the Chargers. It's not just the fact that he lacks athleticism to be able to get back into his step and make a block. He also isn't making the right reads at the line as well. There were multiple plays where the Giants just had free rushers in Herbert's face because Bozeman either completely missed the assignment or didn't communicate it properly to the rest of the offensive line. This is going to be a problem the Chargers can't fix unless they were to elevate Derwin James to be able to take Bozeman's place. And right now, that doesn't seem like a high possibility. For whatever reason, Bradley Bozeman is beloved by this Chargers coaching staff. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I think Andre James is going to all of a sudden elevate the play of this offensive line. Yes, he probably needs to be given a shot at some point this season, but let's also remember Andre James was one of the worst starting centers in all of football last year. Yes, he was in an offense that he wasn't exactly suited for, but who's to say that the Chargers offense is all of a sudden going to start suiting him as well? We don't know what Andre James is. At some point, we probably are going to have to take a shot and at least try him as the starting center. But for now, we're probably just going to have to live with the fact that Bradley Bozeman is going to be the starting center for the remainder of the season. When you look at the guard spots, Zion Johnson is still as inconsistent as ever. There's moments when he actually holds up pretty well in pass protection, but he just seems to have these moments where he completely loses his entire sense of where he is on the field. When you look at his PFF grade right now, it's abysmal, mostly as a run blocker, as a pass blocker. It's around average, but average is not going to be enough for the Chargers if they really want to make a playoff push. He's got to elevate his game a little bit, and at this point in his career, I just don't have the faith that he ever is going to be able to elevate it, which means the Chargers should be looking to replace him in the offseason. At the other guard spot, Mekhi Becton has just had a rough go of it to start with the Chargers. The first couple weeks of the season, he was sick against the Chiefs, and then he started to deal with some injuries, and then a concussion that now kept him out against the Giants. He still is in the concussion protocol from the last update that we've received on that. We're hoping to get him back this week against the Commanders. But if not, you're going to be looking at yet another week of Jamari Salyer. Now, Salyer did an offseason where he lost a lot of weight, but I don't think Salyer is a fit at guard. I think his most natural position is tackle, and even then, I really don't think the Chargers should be playing him at tackle. I think he's a major liability, and he was one of the worst offensive linemen in all of football last week. So really, the Chargers don't have many good options. Their best healthy offensive lineman right now is, out of all people, Trey Pipkins. Trey Pipkins, the guy who Chargers fans have wanted the Chargers to get rid of for years, somehow is now the best starting offensive lineman they have. This is disastrous. This is worst case scenario for the Chargers, but somehow they have to make it work. So what have they done? Well, we do know they brought in 4 offensive linemen for workouts this week, and they just signed Michael Dunn to the practice squad. Dunn is an NFL veteran. He's been in the league now for 7 years, bounced around quite a few teams. Most recently, he was with the 49ers. His most recent starts were with the Cleveland Browns. We started 2 games for them last year. He had only 171 snaps, so there's not really much to evaluate. We do know that he had some good reps against Jalen Carter and the Philadelphia Eagles, which is an encouraging sign, and he did have a pretty strong 2022 season as a pass blocker with a grade of over 70. So we do know Michael Dunn can play at least at a replacement level, but if we're asking him to make some long-term starts for the Chargers, that's probably not going to be an answer. And I know Bull fans don't like to hear it, but simply put, there's not going to be a good offensive lineman out there at this point in the season on the free agent market. Those players don't exist. If they exist, they immediately are taken in free agency. At this point in the year, the only bet that the Chargers have to be able to really improve the offensive line is to either A, get healthy, which who knows if that's going to happen, or B, trade for someone. I think Joe Hortiz is going to be forced to make a move for someone. We already saw that he is willing to trade for players, like he traded for Deculus, although that's turning out to be a pretty poor decision. But at some point, he's going to have to make a trade for an offensive lineman who can play at least an average starting level, or else Herbert is going to continue to get hit over and over and over again, and that's a major concern. So the Chargers have to figure out a way to be able to adjust if they don't get an offensive lineman in here. How are they going to do that? Well, let's talk about that. When you look at the numbers for Herbert, it's pretty concerning. He's on pace to be hit 140 times this year and on pace to be pressured on 290 of his dropbacks. For those of you who don't know, that would set a record in terms of percentages for the most pressured quarterback in NFL history, at least since we've been keeping track of these statistics. That might be the worst offensive line of all time. And you have a top 5 quarterback. And you have a quarterback who has had injuries in the past. He missed a few games in 2023 after he injured his collarbone. He cracked ribs the year before that and was never healthy the entire year. And then last year he dealt with plantar fasciitis and he dealt with a high ankle sprain. Now, in fairness to Herbert, he's played through almost all these injuries and has still played at a high level. But at some point, those injuries are going to mount on him. I know everybody's been saying Joe Burrow might be the Andrew Luck of this generation. I'm fearful that Justin Herbert might be the Andrew Luck of this generation. That he just continues to take so many hits over and over and over again that he might retire early, and I wouldn't blame him. The Chargers should have invested more assets in the last offseason to improve the offensive line. They didn't. So now they're going to have to find a way to be able to make in-season adjustments to their offense to deal with the pressure. When you look at what that could potentially look like, I think two things the Chargers have to do. Number one, they have to run more RPOs and screens. Right now, they're only running it at a 7% rate in the entire NFL. That's the lowest in the league, despite having the most pass-happy offense in the entire league. And then when you look at screen percentages, they've only run screens on 2% of their plays. That's also the lowest mark in the NFL. And they have yet to run a screen to a running back. All the screens they have run have been to wide receivers. So this is not an ideal situation if you're trying to look for a quick passing game for the Chargers. Most of their passing plays have been deep shots, and I understand why they want to do that. Quentin Johnston has been excellent this year and is on pace for his best season ever and could potentially finish as a top 10 receiver this year. But if you're going to be passing deep, that means your offensive line has to be able to hold up for a decent amount of time for those long plays to develop, and right now they can't do that. They're going to have to start to exploit the short areas of the field. We saw them start to do a little bit of that in the second half against the Giants, but it just wasn't enough. So what I think they need to do is, A, keep Omarion Hampton in as a blocker a lot more to be able to chip, give Herbert just those extra little tenths of a second to be able to get rid of the football. And B, they're going to have to move the pocket as well. I think play action is going to be crucial for the Chargers in the next few weeks here. They are a good play action team. We saw it week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. They didn't run much of it, though, against the New York Giants, which was really surprising to me. And play action doesn't have to have a successful running game to work. It can work in and of itself just because the threat of the run is enough to draw in those linebackers. Move the pocket, get Herbert on the boot, get him moving, get him in positions where he's not going to be taking as many hits. And remember, you have a receiver who can win in the underneath very easily. In fact, you have 2 of them in Keenan Allen and McConkey. Quentin Johnston is a threat in and of himself that they're going to have to keep those 2 safeties back. But if the Chargers aren't going to be even threatening the lower part of the field, then defenses are just going to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback. It's going to be a mess, but the Chargers have the tools to be able to address it. They don't have the tools to fix the offensive line, but they have the tools to be able to work around the weakness of the offensive line. We'll see if they actually use those tools at their disposal. Thank you so much again for watching. I'm Sam Peña with Chargers Digest. If you could, we'd love it if you could like and subscribe. We're trying to build the channel here from the ground up and would appreciate any support that you can show. And until next time, Bolt Nation, remember, bolt up.